Okay. So I had to go buy this 16mm box end wrench, and you notice it has a little dip in it so it can fit inside here. Then you take another wrench, a crescent wrench, and you hold it so you can turn this one. So you're just going to keep doing that until you get it all the way off, and then when you're done, you're going to take this piece off here and you're going to put this on the new shock that you got. So this is the OEM part that comes with the car. You're going to reuse this. You can reuse this as well. This is a bump stop, and you can use this over to the black part. So here we are, finished the suspension last night and kicked my butt. Wasn't able to do the back until the very end. It was already getting dark. So I haven't adjusted it yet. I'm not sure where I have it adjusted at. It's not all the way down and it's not all the way up. So I'm gonna take it for a test drive and see if it worked. So wash the car and put the hubcaps back on, but I haven't had a chance to finish. So I'll finish tomorrow. Alright YouTube, here we are, part 2. I finished putting on the suspension, but looks like my front axle is messed up, so I already took off this spindle nut. I did it with the car on the ground so the wheel wouldn't turn, and I used this what is this, 30mm socket, but I needed to put a breaker bar on there because I couldn't get it off with my impact gun. So I used this and I put a pipe on the end of it so I could get more leverage. So I was able to get that thing off. Now I'm gonna take the wheel off and then try to get the axle off. All right, after I got the spindle nut off, the wheel off, taking off these 3 bolts down here. These are 13mm, I believe, and that's gonna release the spindle, I believe, steering knuckle from this swing axle right here, or this trailing arm, A-arm, whatever you want to call it. It's going to separate the hub, the spindle, from that. Alright, I took off all those bolts. That allows this to move. I put the nut back on there and hit it with the sledgehammer to tap the spindle out from the hub. So once I get the spindle, the drive shaft separated from the spindle, I'm able to separate this, and then I got to take off the bolts that go on the inside. Alright, so the axle is out from this end. I used a little bit of this before I tapped it out. Came out pretty good. Now my next step is to take off the bolts for the, you can see where it's separated here. I think this is where my problem is at, where the joints are messed up, the bearings. Anyways, there's the axle, and then here you see those special Torx bolts. I don't have that right size, so I'm gonna have to go get it. It's around the T35 or something like that. I don't know what size it is, but that's the CV joint right there. That's gonna come out, disconnect from the transmission basically, or transfer box. This is a front end drive, so I don't know what you call it. So I'll be back. All right, YouTube, here we are back at it again. I had to go to the store and pick up one of these. This is a 12-point wrench. The measurement is M8. Call it an M8 size. This is a 3/8 drive with the M8 point on it. You can see it's 12 points there, mostly for German and cars. Got the new axle here, and this is from AutoZone or O'Reilly's. I think it's O'Reilly's. It's actually a German rebuilt one, so you can see how it's kind of used there, but it's all new seals, new bearings, so we should be good. So we're just gonna go ahead and put this on. Alright, just wanted to show you how I'm doing this. I got a screwdriver jammed in between that nut to keep the axle from spinning. Then I got my 12-point M8 socket driver and a wobbly extension. The CV boot is going to get in your way a little bit, so make sure your bolt is in there, your socket's in there good to avoid stripping. Alright, here we are with the old one. Here's the new one. It comes with this little gasket. It has a sticker on there, and this is going to go towards the towards the transmission. Stick it on there, and it's going to sit here. The stock one doesn't have a gasket because it's flush, but this one has a little bit of a ridge on there. We're going to put some of this grease here on this bearing grease on this CV joint and put this back together. So I resorted to a impact gun, and helps out because I don't have to keep going back inside the car and putting it in gear and putting it back in neutral. So I just have a few extensions on here, and they're the wobbly kind, so that way I don't have to have a straight angle. And this is how I'm tightening them up. Alright YouTube, we're pretty much done here, wrapping it up. It's going to take the jack stand off. Show you the last piece that I did, which is tighten up those 3 bolts right there. Those 3 bolts. I think those are the bolts that they use to align the front end. Got all the CV joint bolts tightened up. Use my impact gun to do that. Greased it up. I recommend greasing it before you put that gasket on. And we're good. We'll test drive, see how it works. Alright YouTube, I just wasted a bunch of money because, as you notice, my rear end is about an inch gap between the tire and the fender, and the front end there is no gap. So my front end is lower, and I was hearing this terrible noise, so I thought it was my front axle that was messed up. Turns out it's my sway bars rubbing on my axle. So I'm gonna have to raise up this front end a little bit, probably about a half an inch to an inch to stop the rubbing, and I think that'll solve my problem. Alright YouTube, so problem I was having was this axle was rubbing on this anti-sway bar on the other side, not this side. So I went ahead and raised up my suspension, and I measured it up here. I basically just measured the distance from the bottom of the adjuster to the last thread here, and it's about 1.25 inches. So I went ahead and did that on the other side too, and so that way they're even. And then I locked it up, locked the thread up. Here's the other side. What you're going to do is you're going to turn this one this way while you're holding this one. So use your adjuster tool to grab the bottom one and use your hand to hold the top one to lock these in place. You can see here where the axle is rubbing against the sway bar on the inside here. So you can see the mark it's leaving on the axle. So I had to raise it up about 1 inch. See how it works. Alright YouTube, so the day did not end badly. I thought I was gonna have to replace my axle bearings, but it just turned out the car was too low for the front end because the sway bar was rubbing on the axle. So I just raised it up about an inch. So I got about an inch gap there between my tire and the fender. And so it's lower than stock, but not as low as I would like it. So that's it for this stage of project rescue for the 2003 VW Golf. Next is going to be tires and smog.